So we've now reached the end of section 8, and let's review the learning goals of what we were aiming for in this particular section. So we wanted to implement further functionality into our API and gain an understanding of entity framework relationships. We now have set up our first relationship in our database between our user and our photos collection. And we've also taken a look at entity framework conventions and how we can fully define the relationship between the user and the photos. And by fully defining the relationship, we ensure that the photo can only be added if we're adding it to a user. We can't just add individual photos, we have to have a user to add that photo to. We also took a look at seeding data into the database in the lazy way, where we generate some random JSON data and get that into our DB. And we also took a look at the repository pattern now. We're adding a bit more architecture into our application to abstract our controllers even further away from the database than they were. And yes, that does add another layer of abstraction, and some would argue that this is unnecessary. But when it comes to testing, the arguments don't stack up so well because the repository pattern does help us with that. And what we also looked at was using Automapper. We've configured it, we've set it up, and we've taken a look at Automapper queryable extensions which allow us to use projection from our repository into our DTO. So we don't need to handle the mapping inside our controllers, we can leave that to the repository as another one of its jobs to get the data from our database and return it in a presentable format for our API controllers. So we've covered a lot of ground in this particular section, and what we're going to take a look at next is to start to build out our user interface in our Angular application.